Hi, everyone. Welcome to Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. This is our live show that streams on LinkedIn as well as on YouTube. I am so excited to bring you our guests today at Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. This is your opportunity to go behind the scenes of what we do at Speaking Your Brand, but also things like how do we create our own presentations? And in this case, how can we include data in our presentations and in our storytelling to add trust and credibility with our audiences, but also to persuade them and inspire them and ultimately inspire them to take action. I'm Carol Cox, the founder and CEO of Speaking Your Brand. So glad that you're with us. If you're watching live, go ahead in the comments and say hi to us. And if you're watching the replay, say hi as well. My guest today is Dr. Monique Ositelu, who is the founder of ITAN, which is a data consultancy firm. Monique has a deep background and expertise in data analysis and in helping companies understand their data. And Monique was on the Speaking Your Brand podcast. I don't remember what year it was because all the years in 2019 have melded together.
It does.
Do you remember when it was?
It was last year, November, I think. I know.
Oh, okay.
Year, yeah.
Yeah, definitely 2020 and 2021 have just combined into one year. So yes, that was episode 199. You're right. November 17th of 2020 is when that episode aired. So definitely for those of you watching, go back and listen to that Speaking Your Brand podcast episode 2 if you want to dig in even deeper to what we're going to be talking about today. And we are happy to take your questions. So as we're talking, don't hesitate. Put your questions in the chat, whether you're watching live or in the replay. Hi, Diane. Hi, Karen. So glad to have you both here. Monique, tell us a little bit more about your company and about what exactly it is that you do and how you help the clients that you work with.
Yeah, good question. So ITÀN actually is a Yoruba term that means story. And I got that this year, well, COVID, kind of just doing a lot of self-reflection. And that's exactly what I do. I'm Yoruba. I come from a rich lineage of storytellers, but I use that my inherited gift of storytelling now with data. And so that's what I do as a data strategist. And my perspective is that I help my clients tell their stories with data. And what does that mean? That means I go into the data, I do all the stuff that most people don't want to do, right? Numbers make people itch, right? And uncomfortable. But I pull out insights to be able to inform them on different strategies. So a lot of my clients look like education institutions, whether that's K-12 or higher education. And then a lot of nonprofits actually became most of my clients 2020, where a lot of funders were saying, hey, we don't mind, giving you money, but it's limited funding with COVID. And so we need your programs to be data driven. And so I provide that insight to let them know, this is the impact you're having, and pull out insights to also inform their strategies internally. So that's what I do as a data strategist and what we do at ITAN. And I guess part of that too is our commitment of helping our clients tell their stories with data. Is we also have branched out now to do professional development. And so part of that includes our master classes, and a part of that professional development resource is my book that I came out with this year. Yeah, this year. It did happen this year. Definitely a couple months ago. Last month. Okay. Last month. And that's called Data is the New Currency for Decision Makers. And again, just providing resources for individuals, whether they're new to data, they're well-versed in data, but just to also support you to tell your story with data to a non-niche audience to make well-informed decisions to then act. So that's what I do.
Oh, Monique, and I can imagine that so many of the clients that you work with, again, whether they're educational institutions, nonprofits, and even for-profit companies, they all collect data. We all collect data all the time, whether it's data internally, so, on our employees and team members and things that are going internally, but then externally, and especially I can see for nonprofits and educational institutions, who are they impacting, what's getting impacted, and what does that look like? But I can also imagine that they collect all this data and it just sits there. It sits there in databases. It sits there in spreadsheets. And so what are they losing out on by just having it sit there?
Well, first and foremost, a lot of people are missing out on the ability to make well-informed decisions, right? Data gives you insight on where you've been and where you can go. And if you don't use your data adequately or collect your data in a good way, you're missing out on making well-informed decisions. Again, as a speaker, it gives us so much, I don't know, access, right? And so like, I want to be honest, I have a psychology background. So I'm always thinking about the human experience and how can I influence human behavior. And that's honestly the approach that I take with my data storytelling, is using data to influence humans' behavior. And so how do we do that? Data gives you access to influence people's decision making. It allows you to help people make insights. And then it also inspires. And I like to think of those as those three key I's: insights, inspires, and influences. And so that's the kind of the benefits that data gives. And again, it's like it gives you power. So I often hear from a lot of my clients, they're like, I don't know what to do with data. I don't know how data benefits me. And I think that's what motivated me to write the book, because I constantly hear from people telling me, I see your marketing, but I don't know how I would ever use you or collaborate. And I don't know how to use data. So that's kind of what got me into this conversation now.
Monique, of course, we love alliteration here at Speaking Your Brand. So I love the 3 I's. It's so memorable. I just started it down: insights, but inspiration and influence.
Correct.
So I love that. That is very easy to remember. And I wanted to say hi, Melee. So nice to see you here too as well. Let us know if you have questions as we're talking. So Monique, let us talk a little bit about using data in our presentation. So I understand there's a difference between, as an entity, a company, organization, we collect data and we have data that we can analyze and get insights from. Now, of course, a lot of the clients that we work with and a lot of the people who are watching or listening to this are not part of large companies. We're solopreneurs, we're very small business owners. So we have some data, but we're probably not using our own data when we're going out and speaking and presenting on the topic of our area of expertise. However, I feel like so many of us shy away from using data, period, in our presentations. Either we don't know where to look for data, or we're afraid that we're going to bore the audience, because we all have seen the PowerPoint slides, right? They're just like the tiny little numbers and the charts and the graphs, and you can't read any of it. And you're like, why are you showing this to me?
Yeah.
This doesn't mean anything, just a bunch of numbers without context. So then as speakers, as entrepreneurs, how can we use data effectively when we are presenting on our topic?
Yeah, so I would definitely say don't shy away from data. I understand everyone does not have a strong mathematics background or statistics. Even the word statistics may be a little bit too jargony, right? But it's okay. Do not shy away from it. And even to the point of what kind of data source can I use? So before I go into details on how you can use it for your presentation, let's talk about where you can get data from. So if you're like me, I'm about to go into year 3, next year in my small business as an entrepreneur. But I don't have that much data, right? I still collect data and I'm still getting better. So if you're like me, that's fine. A lot of the data you can use actually can be external or third-party data sources, right? So if it's not your own company data, you can use data from like an article that you might have read, whether that's like an op-ed in a mainstream media outlets, NPR, The Atlantic, different things like that. It could be a podcast. Listening on Carol's podcast, she has experts all the time who are experts in their thought leadership topics. You can actually refer to that. You can also use it from, for example, if you know a small business. For example, I work with a lot of nonprofits. And so if a nonprofit knows that a sister organization that has done something very similar to them for a very similar subpopulation that they address, then you can say, hey, maybe I can do that for us too. You can get data from so many different sources. But my thing is, even if you get it from a third-party source of something that you read, you must make sure that it is credible. So make sure you do your due diligence, because if you don't, you actually risk tainting your credibility, and then you fumble your position as an expert. And so that's one of the beauties that data gives you. It allows you to be seen as an expert, right? So when you're not only just relaying data, but providing it in context, allows people to make sense of what you're saying, and they can rely that, hey, this person knows what they're talking about. Data also gives you the ability to quantify a sense of urgency, right? Why is this important, right? Data also gives you an ability to be able to say, hey, I have the right solution. If you do this XYZ process, you will get ABCD, right? How do I know that that's effective if I don't have numbers or data to prove it? And so for a lot of small businesses, there are some ways you can collect data. Start doing surveys. So at the end of a coaching program, right? Or at the end of a service you provide, or at the end of a product, provide surveys. And you can do a very quick 10 question survey. SurveyMonkey is free. I think they allow you to do 10 questions. They may have reduced that option, but something like that, to just ask people questions. What did you get Ask them questions based on your learning objectives to see what are people getting. Ask them questions, what do they think about it? And that way you can start collecting data and you can start getting quotes, right, from those surveys to then be able to speak to your credibility. So data is not just hard numbers and a spreadsheet. Data are people's experience. It's saying, hey, I really enjoyed this podcast. I listen to it every day. It gives me insight on this. So you can also use that data to begin to frame, shift, and pivot. So those are just some options of how you can look at data and what data allows you to do. It gives you credibility as an expert, and that's one of the things it does. So we'll keep talking about some of the more benefits, but I just want to pause there.
Yes. Oh, Monique, I am so glad that you mentioned about even within our small businesses, we can collect data. And it's not just quantitative data in the sense of course, I'm looking at how many podcast downloads that I have per episode and things like that, but also the qualitative data like through surveys. And I'll share, because this is Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. So I'll share a little bit behind the scenes that back in the summer of 2020, so we're in the midst of the pandemic, and we're trying to figure out what does Speaking Your Brand look like as a company when there is no more public speaking in the sense of how we've always known it in person. And so what I did is I sent a survey out to our past clients, asking them different questions. Why did you decide to work with us? What was your biggest challenge? What are you looking to do now over the next 6 to 12 months and so on? And I had some open-ended questions. Then I had a couple of questions where they could drag and drop and rank different things of what was the most important to them, getting paid to speak, submitting speaking proposals, thought leadership, things like that. I literally just threw in thought leadership, just like as an extra thing. It showed up number one in both of those questions that I asked, where I asked people to rank things, had no idea. The Thought Leader Academy, which is the now our signature program, came because of the result of doing that survey.
See that, and that's the point. See, data just it opens doors and access for opportunities that you wouldn't even think about. And that's just a really great example of that. And as you're talking, I was also thinking LinkedIn is also a good source for you to grab data. So do these polls, ask people questions, and that can give you insight on how you want to pivot and shift your business. And so that's like a perfect example on how you've been able to scale, but it's based on the data you got from your clients. So that's perfect.
Yes. Okay. I'm so glad you said that.
Yep.
Now, okay, let's think about using data in our presentation. So I know that when I do a presentation, whether it's at a conference or say a business group, I try to pull in some third-party credibility because of course we're experts in our field and we have a lot of knowledge, but it's always helpful to have some backing from another external source because it just adds to that credibility. So I'll go and find a quote or mention an article in Harvard Business Review or something that has clout, like something that people recognize that people see as an authoritative source. And then I think about data, let's think about numbers and statistics, which can be really powerful when we share things, especially when statistics are like on the really high end or like on the really low end, where it's like only 3% of people do this, or like 95% of people do this. And you're like, wow, that's a lot. And so, but I feel like a lot of us get tripped up and exactly how to share numbers and statistics that provide the context and the story behind what that means. So how would you help us with that?
That's a really good question. And the approach that I do honestly comes from data story. So let's see. Let me start with this by saying this. To be able to put data into your presentations, it really depends on who your audience is, right? So who your audience is, and a data story provides a framework of how you will present the information and what information you will provide. So you want to present information that's important to your audience. So you need to know what is kind of keeping your audience up at night, right? And also keeping in mind what is the goal that you want to achieve in your speaking engagement. And then you want to understand, even if you have a highly sophisticated audience, it's always best to present it as if they're a non-niche audience. You never know who's recording. You never know who may come in. And then sometimes that's better for other people, even if they're well-versed, to still be able to apply it to other areas. So I'll give you a quick example just of my own little story on how I got into data stories. So I was working on my PhD, and I have like some people joining in. I have a strong background in statistics and mathematics, maybe not be everybody, but everyone on my committee, my dissertation committee, they were not well-versed in statistics. And I quickly ran into this obstacle of how am I going to successfully defend and graduate if my committee doesn't understand it? So I honestly had to go back to the drawing board. I had some complex data analysis, predictive, and all this XYZ stuff. I went back to the drawing board and I did this. I wrote out my findings in lay terms. I put it in a narrative, and I used data visualization techniques. Now, at that point, I didn't know that was data storytelling, but that honestly was my approach. And by the time I finished and I presented, my entire committee completely understood what I had to present. One of my committee members was a sociologist, not well versed in statistics, felt that my dissertation would make a huge impact on the world, right? I was like, oh, that's a big accolade. And honestly, 2 years later, after I defended my dissertation, where I used complex data results, was cited in an NPR article where I was referenced as an expert, right? Because of my ability to take complex data and relay it in everyday terms. And honestly, from there, it's just kind of data stories have happened. So when you are using data in your presentation, you want to be mindful of who your audience is. And a data story allows you to package your data in a story in a way that your audience can get both context, insight to then act in the way that aligns with what you want them to do, right? And so some ways you can do that is through data visualization techniques, right? Other ways you can do it, again, is making sure you kind of speak to people's emotions. And different ways you speak to people's emotions is not just only with the story, but also on how you present your data. Is it all this stuff all at once, or is it nice and clean, right? And that's also a huge thing to take away. And a huge part of it is that data really does help people filter out what is and is not important. And so in a world where we are oversaturated by information, data really allows us to pull, this is important, and this is a main thing you should get. This is a huge takeaway, so people can pull out and make a well-informed decision and then act in ways that align with what you want them to do. So I hope that kind of answers your question, Carol.
Yes,
Okay.
everyone. So we have, say, Mary Beth is saying that's brilliant, Monique. So yes, that makes a lot of sense. And I know Karen was asking about the name of your book, so we put that in there. Data is the new currency for decision makers, and I'll also go find the link to that, and we'll pop it in the chat there as well. All right, so Monique, there's this kind of well-known saying or quote where it says that one death is a tragedy, a million is a statistic. Because as human beings, we relate person to person. We relate on that kind of that human level. And so I think about just like things that have happened over the years and what we like those iconic photographs of things that have happened. We remember it because it's one person, one day, one situation versus like seeing a headline that says like, so-and-so many people have been affected by this. Even thinking about COVID and the pandemic, I mean, it's shocking to think of over 700,000 Americans have died from COVID-19 since the pandemic started, but we can't really wrap our heads around a number like that. But if we know someone personally who's been impacted, then it makes it real for us. And so I'm thinking about that in our presentations. And when I think of data storytelling, which is maybe a little bit different, I know that you look at like insights within data, but I think about how can I take this number or the statistic and put a human face to it?
Mm-hmm. I like to call that humanizing data, right? And so honestly, you're getting to what I call that sweet spot of data storytelling. And so the sweet spot of data storytelling is 3 ways. One, you have to know your audience. What does your audience care about? You have to know what is the story your data is telling you, or how are you using a third party's data source to support your argument? And then third is that emotions. It has been proven, research has shown that majority of our decisions are made from our emotions. And so just hitting to the rational part and providing facts without context doesn't help at all. So as you were talking about COVID, you kind of reminded me of this example that I like to use. And this happened, I think, December of 2020. Yes, thinking about our time frame. December 2020, there was this article that said that I think 1 million individuals had contracted COVID in like one day. Or was it 5 days? Might have been 5 days. In a week. Yeah, it was like a week. They had 1 million individuals had gotten COVID in a week. And that meant nothing to me, right? Because I'm like, at this point, we've been in this for about 10 months and it's overwhelming. Everyone's getting COVID. But I continue to keep on reading. And as I continue to keep on reading, they gave you a reference point, which is also helpful when you provide data, is also to give someone a reference point to compare it, to see the significance. And so what they said was that from the first 100 days, it took 100 days from January 2020 until 100 days afterwards for us to reach 1 million COVID cases, whereas it took less than a week for us to reach 1 million COVID cases. And then it snapped and it's like, oh my gosh, COVID is everywhere. I'm staying in the house. Although that probably wasn't the right reaction, but that was my reaction. I was like, I'm not leaving. And so that gave me what? A sense of urgency. It brought it to my world. That's what data does, right? It brings it close to people and it humanized it. No longer was it this abstract millions of people who I don't know, but then it brought it close to home and let me see behind that million number are people, our lives, our families, our children, our mothers, our fathers. And so it kind of made me kind of like, okay, now let me change my behavior and I'm going to stay home. Now, I'm not saying that was accurate, but it did all three of those points of landing in the sweet spot of data storytelling. Will it influence my emotions, and it caused me to act and it influenced me, right? And so that's the beauty of what data does. It really quantifies the issue for you, and it can get your audience to act. And in this case, it didn't inspire me, but it did cause me to act and stay home for Christmas. I didn't go visit family for Christmas.
Yeah, Monique, I'm with you. I didn't go anywhere for a year, so
like, okay, I don't feel so bad. I don't feel so bad.
Yeah, yeah, I totally understand. All right, so then I love this idea of the sweet spot of data storytelling being your audience, the story, and the emotion. And I love that you mentioned emotion because I do feel like just in general, we tend to leave that out, but especially when it comes to thinking about data, that's usually the last thing on the list that we think about. But to your point about reading that article and then providing the comparison between the 100 days to reach a million versus the 5 days, it did kind of prompt you to make a decision. And that's the whole point of your new book is about data being used to make decisions. So can you tell us a little bit more about who the book is for and what's in the book and what we'll learn by reading it?
Yeah, definitely. So the book really stemmed from me having consultations with either prospective clients or clients that became my clients. And they all kept asking this question: how does data benefit me? And I realized, if they're having these questions, there might be a lot of people who are having these questions. And so it's ideal for individuals who are about beginning level to intermediate level as far as your comfort level with data, who are either want to have some influence in your respective area, or you want to make more or better, well-informed decisions, right? So in the case of speakers, you want to either inspire your audience, you want to inform your audience, or you want them to act a certain way. And so this book would be ideal for you because it's like a soft introduction, and it really helps you build out a skeleton of what your data story is, right? And it gives you a whole narrative, right? And that's the approach. I approach it in a narrative. So I include some of my success stories of how I apply data stories and how it's effective. And it allows you to really see the power that data stories can provide you as you grow. And like one of the big things data stories has done for me as a speaker, it has expanded my reach of audience outside of my own direct network. And that's because, a lot of people, yes, stories are important, but when you can provide numbers to quantify it, it really makes you a credible expert and people really begin seeking you out. And so 2 weeks ago, I represented the US. They had 3 countries, Spain, Denmark, and the US. And I represented the US to speak before prime ministries and global policymakers. Over 30 countries were in representation. And they wanted me to talk about equitable global policymaking at the intersection of data, race, and equity. Like who can do that, right? So it's just me being able, but I was able to talk about it in a way that they didn't even realize I was using numbers, but I use numbers to provide a sense of urgency, bring it home to them, because regardless of what country you're from, everybody speaks data, right? And they can understand how numbers affects them. And so honestly, 2 weeks ago, maybe 4 weeks ago, before I got that invitation, that wasn't even my network. And now I'm getting invitations to continue to speak on an international platform. And that's because I use data in my presentations. Honestly, it makes you become more of an expert and it solidifies your arguments and any insights. Most people want answers, right? They're looking for answers and they're looking for a filter so they can make the right decision and to direct limited resources. Data gives you that ability to do that. So again, it gives you those 3 eyes. It gives you insight so you can make strategic decisions, right? It allows you to influence people's behavior. In that example, global equitable policy making is important to me as far as my content area. And 3, it inspires people. And I got so many responses of, oh my goodness, I didn't think about race. I didn't think about gender. We're going to do some differences in our policy making in our XYZ country. So those are the 3 eyes that it gives you in allowing you to be credible and an expert.
That's amazing, Monique. Congratulations on that. I love that. What a huge opportunity and visibility for you. That's incredible. So those of you who are watching either live or in the replay, let us know if you have any questions here as we get ready to wrap up. Monique, where can people connect with you? Obviously, connect with you here on LinkedIn. Make sure to do that. And then tell us your website address. And then I know we put the link to your book here in the comments, but I assume we can also find the link to your book on your website.
Yeah, it's on my website. So www.ITAN.LLC.com. That's my website. And as soon as you go there, you'll get a little notification to download the book if you would like. And honestly, the book is free. I am a big advocate for equity. That might not, get me on as far as the for-profit side, but I really believe people should have access, and I wanted to remove barriers for individuals to get this information. And so it is a free download for you. And you can find me on my personal page here, LinkedIn, Monique Ositelu. I think it's a comma PhD. I don't know if the comma's there or not, but I'm LinkedIn. Also, my personal Twitter page, I'm pretty active as well, Monique Ositelu, just how you spell my first and last name. And then I have 2 pages on Instagram and Facebook for my business. So Instagram, the business is ITAN, ITAN.LLC. And then Facebook, it's ITAN LLC. So ITAN LLC. So that's how you can reach me. And I'm more than happy to continue the conversation.
Great, Monique. And I know that you are everywhere because I got you sharing about our conversation today and all the platforms, which I so appreciate. I so appreciate that. That was fantastic. Yep. And okay, we do have a question from Sarah. She says that she's curious on examples of data visualization techniques to tell a story. Monique, do you have anything that comes to mind?
Okay, let me see. So hold on, let me make sure I understood this, but curious on real examples of data visualization techniques to tell a story. Yes, I do. I'm sorry. My mind is like thinking of all the data visualizations. So it's hard for me to tell you this without having a visual to kind of show you. So let me just kind of give you maybe some background. Mm-hmm. So how do you tell a story with data visualization is that you want to manipulate different colors. So for example, if you want to show, I need to think of something everybody can think of. Outside of COVID, what are we all?
I know that's the only thing I can think of nowadays. So Monique, what about your PhD research? Would that be helpful?
I think it might be a little too complicated.
Okay, all right.
But there's this thing about Zoom fatigue, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's say you want to do a visual for Zoom fatigue, right? And you want to show to your employers, we need to think about a different way to keep our staff engaged, but it has to be outside of Zoom. So you want to show a data visual, for example, a bar chart that shows the majority of your staff are tired of Zoom. So how do you do that? You can do, for example, like a bar chart. And a way you can manipulate colors is, for example, if it's like 78%, so you can see me, 78% of people have Zoom fatigue. This will be at the top, and like 28% would be here. I think 18% would be here. So 18% is here. So what you would want to do is for your 78%, you want it to be a dark color. Dark gravitates people's minds. And then for the little 18, is it 18 or is it 22%? Well, anyway, the 22%, sorry, for the 22%, I promise I'm good with numbers, but the 22%, you can do like a light gray, because the brain will see that as like a background color, right? And so a lot of times I manipulate colors based on what is the story that I want to tell, and my data visualization just complements that. And I don't normally use my data visual and say, hey, look at this 78%, look at this 22%. No, I'm telling the story, shows you the visual, and all it does is just emphasizes, reiterates what your point is. And that's the beauty of data storytelling techniques. It allows you to say the same thing multiple times, so you're able to speak to various learning, how people learn, and it sticks. So when you stop talking, your message keeps playing in people's minds. Again, this has a lot to do with psychology. But again, my book kind of goes into detail about that a little bit, but I do offer masterclasses to help people learn those strategies and techniques in more detail. So if you're interested in that, I do have a masterclass that I just put out as a level 1 masterclass on how to tell your story with data. And that entire week 2, we talk about data visualization techniques. So it's a 3-week course that can help you with those strategies in more detail. So hope I answered your question, Sarah.
Yeah, she said, thank you for getting into specifics. Yes. Okay. That was really useful, Monique. Thank you. And for those of you who are listening and watching, make sure to go to Monique's website. I put the link in there again. And because sign up for her newsletter, because Monique, I get your newsletter and it's really fantastic. And you let us know when those master classes are taking place. So definitely make sure to join Monique's newsletter so you get those.
That's a good way to get into the know of it. Yep.
Yeah. All right, Monique. Well, thank you so much for coming on Backstage with Speaking Your Brand. I have gotten so much out of this conversation. I have some notes, so I am so glad and so thankful for you taking the time to be here.
Thank you for having me. And we'll stay in touch all the ways, I'm sure, on social media. So thank you, Carol.
For sure.